In the past 10 years since I left clinical practice as a doctor in the NHS, I have spoken to tens and even hundreds of doctors who have done the same. And I'm yet to find one who has regretted it. A couple who have questioned it, maybe, but not truly regretted it. Yet the fear of potential regret when you're thinking about leaving clinical practice, especially the safety of the NHS, can be crippling. And it's very common and very real. And I know this from regular messages that I receive from doctors who watch my old YouTube channel, which I'm trying to resurrect now, as well as doctors who have found me on LinkedIn or by word of mouth. And a typical message would read like this. I'm a doctor thinking of leaving medicine. I'm struggling to take the leap. I don't enjoy the day-to-day of medicine, and I don't think that the end point of being a GP is what I want. I'm mainly struggling with the possibility that I might potentially regret my decision to leave. I was wondering how you dealt with that, and how did you know at the time of making the decision to leave that it was the right decision? And did you ever think you would regret it? Whew. And this is very common. Now, at the time of making the decision to leave, which actually happened a few times during my 5-year career as a clinician in the NHS, I don't remember being torn particularly by the fear of regret. There were many other things that I was torn by, but this wasn't it. And I think maybe it was because I actually came to a very unhealthy point where I thought that it would damage my health, my mental health, if I don't leave. Hand on heart, I do not regret leaving clinical practice. However, there are a few things that I do regret, and I would certainly have done things differently if I was to go back 10 years ago. And this is what I would like to talk to you about in the end of this video. Before that, though, I would like to tell you what did help me when I was considering leaving clinical practice, and also what you should be considering and thinking about if you're at this crossroads. So one of the things that really helped me was the realization that I can always go back to clinical practice. No matter how many years of a break I take, it is still possible to go back. In fact, I still keep my GMC registration, just without a license to practice. This has been reassuring over the past 10, 12 years that I've been out of clinical practice. Although when COVID came and my license to practice was reactivated, that was very uncomfortable. I remember receiving that email saying that your license is now active and off you go to the front line if you like. My heart sank. And I guess it was probably a sign that I did make the right decision to leave. Now, the possibility of returning to clinical practice is very real, even after 10 and more years out of clinical practice. And I know this because I'm a member of some groups on Facebook where doctors discuss these things. And I have seen cases where some doctors have returned after some years out of clinical practice. So it is certainly doable. The second point that was really helpful for me is knowing that I would always be able to support myself financially, for example, through locuming. Now, I made a decision to make a clean break at the time when I was leaving and not to do locum shifts because I actually had some savings, and also at the time my family situation was such that I was able not to earn for a few months. But that was a lucky situation. I think for most of you who are considering leaving clinical practice, you do need at least 3 to 4 months savings, as well as that opportunity to locum. The third point is non-judgmental family and friends. At least non-judgmental, but ideally somebody who is actually supportive. Having been coaching doctors for over 10 years, I know that many of you ended up in medicine as a career because of family pressure. And it's very difficult in this situation to leave clinical practice because you feel that you will be disappointing them. And this is a real, common and understandable concern. Luckily, I didn't have that pressure. If anything, my mom and the rest of my family and my closest friends were really supportive. So that certainly helped. The other thing that was particularly helpful was seeing that it can be done, seeing the role models. By that I mean doctors who have already left clinical practice and who managed to start new careers. That was very inspiring for me. I was searching for doctors on LinkedIn who had left clinical practice, and I was reaching out to them, asking how they did it and having lots of conversations. That certainly helped. At the time when I was leaving, which was around 2013, there weren't that many resources and there was still a lot of stigma around leaving clinical practice. So I actually started a website, Other Options for Doctors, I remember. It's no longer existent, where I posted interviews with doctors who had left clinical practice, and I just wanted to create that sense of inspiration for myself mainly, but also for others. That definitely helped me. Now, I have seen in the past 10 years things have really changed, and now it's really common practice to be thinking about diversification and portfolio careers, NHS entrepreneurship, fellowship, all those things, they did not exist when I was leaving. So I think you actually have a lot more choice these days how you can structure your leaving. It doesn't need to be a black and white situation when you work in the NHS one day and then the next day you're not working in the NHS. You can certainly create a portfolio career and see what works and what doesn't, and then make a decision to leave completely if that feels right. Now, let's talk about what you should be considering if you're feeling stuck and you cannot move forward from your crossroads. The first couple of points I already mentioned, and they are the flexibility in that you can always support yourself by locuming while you're figuring out what to do next. And the second point was about the fact that your medical degree is valuable and you can always go back even after several years out of clinical practice. The third point is about reframing, and it's about your mindset. Rather than thinking, am I a failure for leaving clinical practice? You should be thinking, I am creating a better future for myself and for my health. I would say consider putting less importance to your medical degree. Now, it may sound controversial, but actually it's just another degree. Yes, admittedly, much longer than a standard degree and much harder and having taken a lot more sweat and tears. However, it is just a degree. And there is no conscription in the end, although some people would like to do that, especially the readers of the Daily Mail.
Some rubbish in the Daily Mail which made my blood boil.
I remember I wrote an article on LinkedIn a few years back. I will put a link to that article in the description below, where I talked about the cost of training of doctors and the controversy of doctors who have been trained by the government, by the NHS, subsequently leaving, and how lots of people outside of medicine feel uncomfortable about that. I've discovered that actually the general public has a very strong view on the cost that it has taken to train doctors in the UK. However, I would still encourage you to think that the handcuffs that you feel you have tied to medicine now are the handcuffs that you have put on yourself. The other thing to help you move forward is to gain clarity about what to do instead. It's all very well to be thinking in your head about what you don't like, having constant thoughts about what can I do instead. However, to really move forward, you need to feel like you have a certain path lined up. I know this from a personal experience because when I was in my core medical training back in 2009 or 10, I actually resigned on the spot because it was just really bad at the time for many reasons. However, I didn't have an alternative option. And very quickly I realized that, and I took away my resignation. I took a sabbatical for 6 months, during which I did some locuming, I did some exams, and I went back into training. I don't regret that, but it just demonstrates that you do need to have a solid plan before you're leaving. Even if it's a portfolio career, even if it's you doing some side hustles in your head, if you have the clarity of what you're going to be doing instead, that will definitely help. So thinking of your current dislike of medicine, let's think about this in terms of this analogy. Imagine that you are on a boat sailing across the ocean, where the ocean is medicine. The ocean could be any sector, such as healthcare or finance or retail. So let's think about the ocean as medicine. And the boat is your current specialty, or it's your job in medicine, or it's your current setting, for example, a type of hospital or a clinic where you're working. I would like you to ask yourself, is it the ocean that you don't enjoy and you would rather be on the shore somewhere and have nothing to do with water anymore? Is it the sharks in the ocean? Is it the storms of the ocean, the depths that is bothering you? Or is it something to do with the boat? Is it about the size of the boat, or the stability of the boat, the make, whatever, is the parameter? Would changing the boat allow you to remain in the ocean? So this is a very interesting concept that I've recently come across while doing my soul searching, because I'm constantly soul searching and constantly self-discovering. And also think about what is still enjoyable for you about the ocean, what is still enjoyable for you about the boat, and what you feel should be changed. It's very easy to think about what we don't like, but it's also very important to think about what we'd like things to be instead. So think about what aspects of the ocean you would change to still remain in the boat sailing across that ocean, if anything. It might be that you actually do want to go back to the shore and have nothing to do with the water anymore. Or what would you change about your boat to still remain in the ocean if you still enjoy the ocean? When you're thinking about yourself on that boat, think about what you're doing on that boat, because this is something about the skills that you're using on a day-to-day basis. And maybe it's something about that you don't enjoy and you feel like you have an unrealized potential. Maybe there is nothing wrong with the ocean and nothing wrong with sailing your boat across the ocean, and you would like to continue doing that, but maybe you would prefer to do something else while being on that boat and use your different skill set. So if you come to realization about this, that this is the case, maybe it's more about looking how to change a specialty or do more of something within your specialty to kind of repurpose your skill set. It might also be something to do with the timing, that you feel disillusioned about sailing your boat across the ocean. Is it particularly stormy at the moment? And maybe if you weather out the storm, it will get better in a few weeks, months, or even years. How prepared are you to stick around through the storm? Also, it's very important to think about the rewards. What are the rewards for you staying on that boat and sailing across the ocean? I don't mean necessarily the salary that you're getting while being on that boat and sailing across the ocean. However, there are other things that you need to consider in terms of what is a reward for you. And for doctors, and I know this from personal experience, it's about helping others. But if that is the case, how unique is it to the situation of being on the boat sailing across the ocean? Could you achieve the same rewards or similar rewards by being on the shore or being in a different ocean altogether? You would agree that helping others could be achieved by being in other oceans, by sailing different boats, and certainly you're not tied to medicine to achieve that. Of course, in terms of financial rewards, do not underestimate the beauty of financial rewards in medicine, even if you don't currently feel that is the case, especially if you're in junior doctor positions. The more senior you are, the more stability and security potentially you will get, especially if you then do private practice. I say this from my current experience working in a financial advisory company for doctors, and I see so many of our clients who are consultants in dermatology, for example, which is the specialty that I left at the end of ST3, earning fairly decent wage, both in the NHS as well as in private practice. And I often catch myself thinking, this could be me. However, having said that, it is absolutely genuine when I say that I have never regretted leaving clinical practice. And the test for this is to ask yourself, if you were offered X salary in 4, 5, 6 years, would it make you stay in that boat and in that ocean? The answer for me, if I take myself back to 2012, is no. The final points that I want to be talking about in this video is what I do regret and what I would have been doing differently if I was in a situation of considering leaving clinical practice now. And this is really personal to me, so it might not be relevant to you, but there are two things. And again, going back to the analogy of sailing a boat across the ocean, I do regret not exploring another ocean, which is pharma. I also regret not considering changing the boat, for example, changing specialty. And the sort of specialty I think I would have been good at would be occupational health. When you're a medical student, you only get to know a few common specialties, and the lesser known specialties like audiology or neurophysiology or occupational health, they don't really get mentioned. So it's really hard to know about those when you're already building a portfolio towards a particular specialty. I was building a portfolio towards dermatology ever since medical school. So I was in this single track mind, not considering other possible boats. So before you make a decision that medicine is definitely not for you, consider other boats. in terms of considering another ocean, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, for some reason, I decided that pharma is not for me without even researching it, based on my perception of pharma as purely drug development. So I knew that I didn't want to be stuck in the lab developing drugs. And based on that thought, I didn't even research anything. I just never even considered it. So I don't know why I was so bogged down about associating pharma with just clinical development or drug development. There are so many other pathways within pharma, such as drug development, regulatory affairs, medical affairs, and some others as well that could be suitable for somebody with a medical background. And I say this from my experience as an executive search professional that I did for 6 years before recently changing my career for finance. As a headhunter for the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, I saw so many doctors who had left clinical practice and they built really successful careers within pharma and biotech and medical devices. And I often questioned, why did I not look into it? So these are just a couple of considerations before you feel like you have made the decision. Really think about, is it the ocean? Is it the boat? And what can you do about that? So I hope this is helpful. If you have further questions, please drop them in the comments box below, and I will answer either there or I will create another video specifically to answer your question. Bye for now.